All right, welcome to the first section of Chapter 1. What is criminal justice? So this chapter, we're going to talk about what is criminal justice. What are we going to be talking about throughout this whole year? Criminal justice in the United States consists of three different things we're going to talk about, three different systems. Law enforcement, the courts, and corrections. So law enforcement, we're going to spend the majority of our time. We're talking 6 chapters is spent on law enforcement. This encompasses a lot. Day-to-day duties of police officers, what they're doing, the criminal laws that they're enforcing, what gives them authority, all of that stuff. Then we move into the courts. It's a 3 chapters. And it's about going to court, the judge, the lawyers, the jury, what all of them entail. Sorry, I've got to text my son back really quick, and I'm not stopping the video because there is no pause. Anyways, then correction is the last one. And that talks about the different, and then we're going to talk about the differences between prisons, jails. We'll talk about probation, parole, that kind of stuff. And then we'll do a small chapter on juvenile justice and how that differs from the regular criminal justice system for adults. And it says that agencies of the justice system have the authority to arrest, convict, and imprison. And we'll talk about what gives them that authority. So for those who commit crimes, the full weight and power of the system comes crashing down with them, beginning with the arrest. Criminals that commit crime, but they don't get caught, will never be put into the criminal justice system, right? Because they're never arrested. They're the very select few that are smart enough not to get caught, but the majority of criminals will eventually get caught and arrested. And they'll be put into the criminal justice system and get to experience that. The American system of justice is a consensual system that relies upon both public acceptance and public cooperation for it to function effectively. If the public's not accepting of the laws and cooperating with the officers of the law, it's not going to work. We saw that happen a little bit last summer, right? People were protesting and rioting, and chaos ensued because there was no public acceptance. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. So this book was published was published in 2018, obviously 2 years before what we saw play out last summer. This says, if a citizen were to lose faith in the justice process and question its legitimacy, then the day-to-day work of law enforcement officers, the court personnel, and corrections officers would become insurmountably difficult, and their job would be impossible to perform. Last summer, they reached that point where their jobs were impossible to perform because people were not listening to what the police were telling them to do. And you saw that in different cities around the nation. So it goes on to say, today the criminal justice system in this country may be teetering on the edge of just such a crisis. I think last summer we stopped teetering and were pushed over the edge into that crisis. And it says the crisis has arose quickly and fueled by social media as well as news outlets. And I agree with this. It's been more about the last 10 years that the crisis has become what it is now. And definitely social media and news outlets have played into it because they're only focused on the bad, the injustices that are happening. Yes, the injustices do occur, but they make it look like that's all that's occurring, right? They're not showing you everything else, all the good that's being done. You only get to see the bad and the ugly and what's wrong. You're not seeing what's right in the world. So if you only see what social media and the news outlets want you to see, you're going to think, hey, yeah, this system is definitely broken. But if you're doing more research and looking into it, you know police officers, you talk to it, you see the community and what's happening, you might think, okay, yeah, it's not as broken as we might think. Not every cop is a racist. which is true. But is there racist cops? Yes, unfortunately there is. There's racism still in every aspect of America. There's racist teachers. There's going to be racist bankers, right? But is everybody in America a racist? No, it's select individuals that make everybody else look bad. Those racist cops make all the good cops look bad. They give them a bad name. And it's unfortunate, but it does happen. So like I said, it's grown with or become more of a problem with in the last few years. In August of 2014 or the summer of 2014, there was 2 incidences that happened. First, we had, I don't know why these are out of order, but in New York City, Eric Gardner, he was an unarmed black man, was put into a chokehold position, preventing him from breathing, and he died. And then a month later, Ferguson, Missouri, Michael Brown was an 18-year-old unarmed black man who was shot and killed by police. Protests, rioting, looting, burning down stores in the town occurred over a period of days. That was only in Ferguson. Those protests and riots did not go out to other cities. At that point. After that summer, there was people that felt like they needed to take revenge on police officers. 2 New York City police officers were shot dead in their car as they sat there. A person came up and shot through the window, killing them both. In Dallas, there were officers that were at a peaceful protest, and somebody ambushed the officers with a sniper rifle, killing 5 of them. In Baton Rouge, Louisiana, there were 3 officers that were killed by a man that was targeting them. Happened in Austin, Texas. An officer was shot and killed during a traffic stop. And then in Des Moines, Iowa, 2 officers killed in an ambush. Luckily, after last year's riots, and so far, it hasn't happened yet.
In the fire lane behind the school. We need that moved so the buses can come through.
Hasn't happened that people started targeting police officers and shooting and killing them. Yes, police officers have died in the line of duty, but I don't feel like they were targeted like they were in December and subsequent years of 2014. So the anti-police movement has only been embraced by a relatively small portion of America. Not everybody in America thinks the police are bad, but that small portion is making a big scene, and the news outlets, social media is focusing on that small portion. So a lot of people are thinking, hey, we need to listen to them, even though it's still a small portion of them. They distrust the police, and they just think that there's injustices, how suspects, especially Black people, have been treated by the entire justice system. Yes, I do agree that the minority population, especially Black people, do unproportionately get put into the criminal justice system versus white people. There's lots of different theories. There's whole classes that you could take on why this is happening. There's not an easy answer as to why. There's not an easy answer how to fix it too. So since last summer, good changes have been made. Cities and departments have been looking at their policies to figure out, hey, are we discriminating against a certain population? Can there be things that we can do to stop us from discriminating? So it's really brought up a lot of good things as well as a lot of bad things. So it's good and bad. So with what happened with Ferguson and all of that stuff, one of the lessons that was learned from the events was that fairness has a wider meaning than ensuring just outcomes and upholding the due process. They started looking at more, especially with 2020, May 25th, with George Floyd, to make sure that there was a just outcome, right? Making sure that those officers were held accountable. Because a lot of people in America felt like if you unjustifiably shoot somebody using your police badge, you know, that you will not be held liable for your actions. And so that's what kind of started the protesting and rioting last summer, was people wanting justice. Hey, this was an unjustified shooting. They felt like they wanted to make sure that these officers were held responsible. The peaceful protests, however, turned into unpeaceful protests and then into rioting, looting, burning down of cities, city blocks, starting them on fire. And that's when it becomes lawlessness. And is that right to do that? No. Is that the way to get your voice heard? No. Um, Going out and committing crime is not the way to get people to listen to you. So it was unfortunate that it happened, but the protests held around the country called for justice for Floyd and those officers be charged with murder. And we've seen since that those officers, well, the main officer, Derek Chauvin, has been tried, has been convicted and found guilty of the death of George Floyd and was sentenced to 25 years plus in prison. So he definitely was held responsible for his actions. So the video that you're about to see is the riots that happened in Salt Lake in May of 2020. It was a few days after George Floyd was killed. And at the time, Corey was working the public order unit, which is kind of like they go out and do protests and parades and all the events. And they're there in case something ever happens. So he'd gotten information, or the department got information that there was going to be protests at the police station the next day, and they needed all the public order unit officers to be able to go down there. And it wasn't a big deal. This kind of stuff happened all the time. And I went about my day Saturday. We had kind of texted in the morning. He told me they were vandalizing the police department, but kind of that was about it. And usually we just kind of text on and off throughout the day. And I had stopped hearing from him, but I didn't think anything big deal about it because that happens a lot when he gets busy. He just forgets to text back. My sister-in-law had texted me and she's like, hey, have you heard from Corey? And I said, nope, haven't heard from him since probably about 11 o'clock. He must have been busy. This time it's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I sent it. And as soon as I send it, she starts calling me. And I was like, hey, what's up? And she's like, you haven't seen the news? I said, no, why? And she said, they are rioting in Salt Lake. I'm like, what? She's like, you got to turn the TV on. So I did. And one of the police cars, and you'll see it in the video, police car had already been flipped and chaos was ensuing. And so it was crazy when I had turned it on. And the worst part was actually my boys. They were home with me and they saw it going on too. And Corey in the public order unit, if you pay attention in the video, the public order unit is the ones that are in like full long sleeve suits. They're actually fire retardant suits, and they're fully clothed. They're like a gray, just kind of nondescript suit. So you won't see a whole bunch of them. Most of them you'll just see officers that are in just their regular uniform. You'll see some in shorts. Some have shields over their faces, some don't. It just kind of depends on what they have. So anyways, the boys were like, is that dad? Is that dad? Is that dad? Did somebody just throw that at dad? And so after about like 10 minutes, I could see how worried they were getting. So we ended up turning it off and not watching it. My sisters came over and brought their kids to distract my kids that day because they were just kind of like, we've always known that Corey does scary things, but to see it on TV play out was kind of our worst nightmare. And things turned out okay and it was fine. But so you'll watch the video of kind of chronologically what happens throughout the day, and you'll see that it starts out with just kind of like graffiti in the police station and how it gradually changes. And a lot of people wondered like, hey, where were the police that day? Why were they not down there to stop it? And the mayor made the decision that she was going to allow some vandalism and destruction to happen. It'd been happening in the major cities around the US, and she felt like if they could let their anger out a little bit, then they would do that and then go home at the end of the day and feel like they had done what they had come to do. The police said absolutely not, we should have a zero tolerance on this, but she said no, I think this is the best decision. We can replace windows, we can, you know, scrape the paint off, it will be fine. And so since it was at the police station, that's where they usually stage when they have events like this. They don't actually go out and are among the people in their full riot gear, because it just makes people wonder, like, hey, why do they have to show up in their full riot gear? So they always stage out of the way. They're watching the event, and they'll have undercover people in watching the event, but they're never there when whatever event they go to. So they couldn't stage and wait within the police station, because they felt like, how can we deploy out of the police station if the people are right there? What if they barricade it, whatnot? So they were at a grocery store parking lot around the corner, all in vans, waiting for if something was going to happen and watching it. And then they had said to all the police officers, don't go to the public safety building, it's not safe. Well, there was an officer that was coming on duty, and her battery was dead on her radio, and so she didn't know not to go to the public safety building. And when she turned the corner to get there, that's when she saw the protesters out. And at this point, it was only protesting, and they were doing some vandalism, but it wasn't a full-on riot. And you'll see them surround her car in the video. She is able to get away and not hurt, and another police officer came and picked her up. That's when the car was flipped over and they lit it on fire, and that's kind of when the protest turned to a full-on riot. And at that point, the public order unit had 25 officers that day that had responded to this protest. And taking 25 officers into that situation where it had now turned very, very violent, they would have been overrun immediately by the rioters, and they felt that it was unsafe to deploy. So they requested other agencies and their own agencies to be able to come in so that they could get a game plan together and get enough officers to go in with a united front and not be overrun. It took several hours. You had agencies from Utah County, Provo, Lehigh, all the way up into Weber County Sheriff's Office responded. Ogden City police officers were there. You had people from all over West Valley, everywhere in the Salt Lake Valley, Davis County. Hundreds and hundreds of officers responded that day for help, and it took hours for them all to be able to get there. And so that's why the riots went on as long as they did before the police showed up. And unfortunately, there was quite a bit of destruction that happened in those hours. So you will watch the video. And I don't know who filmed it. Corey didn't know who filmed it, but whoever did a pretty good job of the overall what happened that day. You'll see some police officers knock some people down, get a little too violent. There's one guy that takes some rubber bullets and hits into the crowd over the top. And unfortunately it happened, and I'm not trying to justify what they did, but after hours and hours of spent people yelling and throwing things at them, it's hard to continually take that and not get aggravated and defensive about it. And I said, I'm not justifying their actions, but it would be hard to take all day long. Those officers were all reprimanded for it. I think one of them, they charged him with aggravated assault. So they weren't not liable for their actions that day. Most of it was all caught on video. And like I said, they reprimanded all those officers that used a little too much force that day. So Corey, that day was probably the longest, hardest day of his career, and hopefully he doesn't have any more days like that. He went to work that morning. I think he had to be there at like 7 a.m. Saturday. I didn't see him. He worked straight until I think he got home about 7 a.m. Sunday morning. By the time everything settled down, he had several things thrown at him. He got a gallon of jug chucked at him, and it came over his shield and just coated him in milk. And by the time he got home, it was a hot day. It was like one of the hottest days. It was a record-breaking hot day in May. And so that milk had just dried on him, and it was so stinky by the time he had got home. And he was really confused why he was getting a gallon of milk thrown on him. And not only him, there were several officers that had milk thrown on him. So he started asking around. He asked one person, he's like, who brings milk to a protest? That's bizarre. The person's like, oh yeah, no, it helps if you get I can't think of the name now. Oh my gosh. Not pepper sprayed. Gassed. Oh my gosh. Anyways, if the police use, you guys are probably all watching this thinking of the word. Why am I thinking? I can't think of the word. Anyways, whatever it is. Tear gas, that's what it was. If the police use tear gas on them, it helps it so they can like get it out of their eyes and clean it up. So the police, it's not in Salt Lake City's police policy to use tear gas on crowds. And so when the crowds figured out, hey, they're not going to tear gas us, they took the lids off the milk and just started chucking them at the police. So lots of people got hit with gallons of milk. And then the whole next week, there continued, I think for about a week and a half, there continued to be riots every day. Not riots, sorry, protests. None of them got violent again, luckily. And so he worked a lot that week. It was a very tough week for all of us, but it's over now. Anyways, watch the video, and hopefully we never see something like this again in Utah.
Get a moment of silence for the ones we lost and the ones we don't know about that we lost.
But destroying a city and being violent is not a peaceful way of process. It's about George Floyd. This is about Trump. It's about George Floyd. Donald Trump! Donald Trump!
Yeah, that's hot. Oh. Wait a minute. Is there still bullets in there? Shoot. Yep, there is. There's bullets. Hey, get back. There's bullets. Yo, there's bullets in your tail. Bullets in your tail. Oh, shoot. Oh, shoot. There's shrapnel. We got bullets that are going off from the police car, so I have to hide behind this. Oh, shoot. Oh, crap. Dude, one just hit the pole. Oh my gosh.
Well, we believe it's maybe some ammunition. We just found it on the sidewalk here. We heard that people were hearing popping of ammunition from inside the police car, so we're assuming that this might be from that.
I see humans with feelings! Humans with anger! We need to take over the rest of the city! This shit's nothing! That's one cop car! They can replace that! Let's go! Let's go! Barricade the streets! Take that!
Everybody just get this the fuck out of here. Hang on. You're not doing it. Right. Oh, please. He's not going to run George Floyd. George Floyd.
You good?
Extend the line, link up with those guys. Extend the line all the way down. Hey, if you got a helmet, I need you to extend the line all the way down to those officers down there.
Hey, get behind them! Put the fucking badge on, get behind them! Get the fuck out of here, dude!
Stop trying to be a hero! What? Our heroes don't even fucking help. What do you think you can do? They're standing right here! Go!
Don't go!
We don't want violence. We don't want death. We don't want murder.
Dude, that kid's falling on deaf ears.
Hey, your bitch ass! Fucking co-worker! Shot my brother!
What a b***o, man. Look at his bum shorts. And not pop off on someone for no reason because you're scared or f***ing pissed. Period.
That's all over the f***ing game! No body cam? You guys take those motherfuckers in the goddamn thing and delete it before the cops get to see it. I know what you did to my kidnapped me, Cody. You son of a. You killed my little brother.
You're a terrorist! You shot him! You shot my boy! He ain't coming back! You might kill people! He ain't coming back because you took him out! You took him out! You killed my boy!
What's up, funny? If you're a family member, you can